I've chosen to title this presentation Yesh, biyado, Qabbalah, and it is a Hebrew phrase that resurfaces times and again in Hebrew medieval manuscripts, and it literally translates as "for there is a tradition in his hand." It it is used by copies to introduce texts that they receive from somebody else, and especially if they're looking at texts that are hard to find, or if they're texts that make part of mystical tradition. And Kabbalah, although it generally means tradition, it can come in many different forms. So you may be familiar with the Kabbalistic Sephiroth. There is a Kabbalah of names of ritual power, where you'll have names from the Bible translated into pseudo-alphabets. And most importantly, you'll have the Kabbalah of the names of God, of which the most well-known and the most important is the four-letter name, Yud Hey Vav Hey, the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, first found in the Hebrew Bible. This is a name that was shrunk from ever since ancient times, and it was routinely replaced in the Hebrew scribal tradition with an impressive number of substitutes. We don't read this name, actually. Whenever we read the Bible, when we see Yud Hey Vav Hey, we read Adonai. And obviously, with so many substitutes, there have been attempts to both explain and prescribe the right ones. These explanations emerged and were popularized in the Middle Ages, as we shall see. And several centuries later, academic scholarship has begun to interrogate whether theosophical and mystical approaches to the names of God had direct links to scribal practices, and that's the second part of my presentation. And more recently, there have also been attempts to classify the substitutes chronologically, geographically, and also typologically in relation to the types of scripts. And so my study builds up from this paleographic approach to the substitutes, but with a view to the ductus. I will use HebrewPal as a digital tool. You can scan the QR code for the website. So in HebrewPal, I collected, compared, and analyzed over 800 substitutes from all scribal traditions of the Middle Ages. And I wanted to see whether there is any overlap or continuity or disruption between scribal practices. And I will show my results towards the end, using the case study of a particular substitute. But before I begin, I would just like to clarify that the sacred name of God, the four-letter name of God, was substituted from ancient times because of the first commandment in the Bible. One should not take God's name in vain. And so we find in the 1st century CE at the latest, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, substitutes for the name of God, such as this one. When the name of God was substituted by 4 points. In the Middle Ages, the most popular way to, obviously, there will be substitutes for the name of God in whatever material we have from the late antiquity. It's not very much, but in the Middle Ages, the most popular way to replace the name of God are the 3 yods with one place on top of the other. So for those of you here who don't know Hebrew, this is the letter yod. It looks like a hook. It can be rounded or sharper, depending on the script and on the scribe. But you can see more or less the correlation between this letter and the substitute for the name of God. Now, in the Middle Ages, there will be several theosophic, even Talmudic and rabbinic explanations for this preference, some of which also acquired prescriptive qualities. One of them would be Todros Abulafia, early 13th century Spain. He reminds us of 2 ways of writing the substitute. One is in linear succession, like so, and one with the yod on top of the 2, which is the most popular one. And Abulafia puts forward a numerological link with Simnaltin. So how does he interpret this tradition of the 3 yod? Yod is the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, so it has the numerological value 10. 3 yods, 3 times 10, 30. 30 is the number of words in the first part of Psalm 19. There we go. We have an explanation for it. The three odes also stand for the mystical triad God, Torah, and Israel, and with God naturally on top of the other two. An alternative to this numerological explanation belongs to Eliezer of Worms, who thinks that the substitute in its triangular shape resembles a crown. It's his opinion, and he pairs it up with the fact that the first sephirah of the 10 sephirot is keter, which means crown in Hebrew, and is just above the representation of God as Ein Sof, as the endless one, and therefore it makes sense to represent the name of God as a crown. In 12th century Ashkenaz, we're looking now at southern Germany, Rabia, who was very learned in Hebrew jurisprudence as well, includes a substitute, in his analysis, includes a substitute that also contains an additional symbol next to it, which he calls an inverted beth. Now, this is what a Hebrew beth looks like in the same manuscript where the name is taken from. Same here. We do not know whether Rabia had these exact examples in mind, but this is what he says. This also has numerological significance in relation to the 32 parts of wisdom in Isaiah 57:15. So you have the three yods 30. Bet is the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, so 32. 33 is also the number of occurrences of Elohim, the name of God, in the book of Genesis. Now, modern scholarship didn't really buy into this, even starting with Moritz Steinschneider in 1895. He actually dismisses any conscious link between the graphic forms of the substitutes and Kabbalistic readings of scripture. And he sees the developments as prompted by scribal practices and, having pragmatic reasons behind them. But 3 decades later, a scholar called Jakob Lauterbach revisits the substitute to ask about their remarkable diversity. And indeed, he does a very detailed study where he presents a classification of 83 different types of symbols. But his classification is shaped by his reading of medieval writings in relation to these substitutes, and his approach is mainly exegetical. And the logic behind his reasoning is the following: if there is variation, there must be a meaning behind it. But though Lauterbach rightly notes that changes in substitutes are not chronological, he still pushes the idea that they may match writings of Eliezer of Worm, Abulahia, or Rabia. You can see, though, that he will be trying to explain, or rather to say to explain away the inverted beth, for which there is no explanation in the writing of Rabia. In any case, it's not that he lacked analytic skills as much as he lacked the tool of a systematic study. In 2003, Krina Ductus, an MA student from the University of Jerusalem, had more material available from the database of her teacher and mentor, Malachi Betalier, a paleographer who collected data about most dated manuscripts, most dated Hebrew manuscripts of the Middle Ages. And she did a study of substitutes in manuscripts until the year 1300. Let me see. So, yeah. And she actually based her study on the chronology as well as on the type of script and the mode of script. So she looked at manuscripts from Ashkenaz. She has a style which she calls French, which we wouldn't call it a type of script anymore, but she looks at them from the perspective of cursive, semicursive, and square scripts. Her precision in drawing and her scholarly rigor are definitely impressive. The study is limited because it's done with analog tools. She drew everything. And if we were to go back to the manuscripts and see where exactly she took this from, we would have a very hard time. We'd basically have to redo all her work if we had only a small research question about it. But we have now a tool that can help us collect and store data in a way that can be reused, and that is HebrewPal. In HebrewPal, we uploaded and annotated over 1,000 Hebrew manuscripts. Mainly, most of them are dated. We also have undated. We have manuscripts in all shapes, sizes, with scripts from all the Hebrew cultures. So we would look at diplomatic manuscripts in Ashkenazis in cursive script. We have manuscripts in Byzantine script, liturgical manuscripts with decorations, but also letters from the Cairo Geniza. And we also look at scripts that are on roof slates. This one is from Cologne, or at mosaics. This is a Byzantine mosaic. And by the end of the project, we hope to have at least 5,000 manuscripts that we can work with in a comparative study. So let's have a look at the website itself. Now I have to bear with me. We're opening a page, but okay. Right. This is the website we use with the database. And here on the left-hand side menu, you can select whatever you're interested in. If you're looking for a particular scribe, if you want to see a certain manuscript, obviously you have item images if you're looking for something on a page. But what we will work today are graphic elements. So the elements that we cut and described according to given parameters, paleographic parameters. And here on the right-hand side menu, you have a list of all elements, starting with letters, but we also look at punctuation, numerals, any graphic sign that you can find on a manuscript. Basically, we also have quite a broad menu for decorations, and for letters, and not only for letters, not only do we have the letter itself that we look at, but we can also select components of the letters. So for example, if we want to look, an aleph in Hebrew would have a main oblique stroke. This letter has a series of features. It can reach the baseline, it can be straight, roundy, wavy, etc., etc. So if you're interested in this kind of feature, you can actually look for it and see whether it occurs most frequently in a specific time period or in a particular type of manuscript or of script. And obviously, you can also narrow down your search by century. And as I said, by script type and mode. But what I'm interested in and what I'm working towards in this project are the substitutes, which are grouped under divine symbols. And more specifically, I wanted to see if different Hebrew scripts would come with their own paleographic version of a substitute. But in the meantime, I have come to appreciate how the ductus and the allographs of the substitutes shape their definitions. And I did this because HebrewPal led me there, basically, through the fact that I looked at such symbols comparatively. And you will see that for divine symbols, we also have element descriptions, and we try to stick to the basic ones more generally. And we try to stick to what we saw, to the visual features. So for example, when we had the three yods with what Rabia calls a beth, we just said abbreviations or signs, simply because that's what we saw. That being said, the project is ongoing. We have meetings where we discuss and rediscuss these parameters as more material is uploaded onto the website. So who knows? Next year you might see a different menu. Um, um, so to give you an example, right to. We're just going to search for the one with the substitutes. You see, here we have so many different elements next to the three odds that it's very difficult uh to give them more specific definitions, but we just let the data talk and select and compare as we find fit. So, and just a second. I have something on now. I would now like to present the results of my study, which are on my PowerPoint, which is why I'm stuck. Just a second. All right, there we go. Now, with the data in front of me, I could look at a particular case study, and that is the yods without any other symbols and without any additional marks. And I could confirm that the same concept of the substitute can be found in manuscripts of different types and of different Hebrew cultures. So you can find the three yods in Italian 11th century and 12th century manuscripts, in Sephardic 13th century manuscripts, in Ashkenaz 15th century manuscripts, and also in Italian 15th century. And what is different in the substitute has to do with the type and mode of script more than anything. You cannot see my arrow, so I'm just going to point with the pointer. If you have a look at the Ashkenaz example, here perhaps some of you, Florian, you might notice the Gothic features. Because of the fishtail bifurcations that we have in the two yods here, and the hairline. And this, obviously, the hairline feature is a feature of Ashkenazi Gothic script. It's not the result of a visual interpretation of the name of God. And the same with the Italian rotunda. This is a classic example of a semi-square Italian rotunda, and the yods are, you guessed it, they're just round. And one more thing, if you look at the Italian 12th century manuscript, we will notice that there is a difference here between the two substitutes of the divine symbol. Please ignore this. It's the same substitute, but it's written in two different ways. And this is actually a very easy way to tell the difference between two hands in the same manuscript, just by looking at the substitutes. So it also helps us in this way. And now I'd like to move on to the text, to the case study of two allographs of the three-odd substitute. We're looking here at three examples of ligature substitutes, and that one example where there is no ligature. The ductus of the graphic symbols in the two cases is dictated by the flow of writing and the place of the name of God in the context. So if you go back to the website, I'll just show you how we actually work with these on Hebrew Pattern. Okay. So if we go back here, select the element, I'll open it in the new tab, and then we open the item in image, we can actually have the context and see where it appears in the manuscript. And here in yellow, we can see that it's outside the text frame at the top, in a phrase that is written with words that have lower density overall. And this is actually a standard blessing in Hebrew that he would add on top of the text. B'Shem Adonai na'aseh v'natzliach. So in the name of the Lord, we shall perform and succeed. And then the other three appear in a different context. If we click on this one here, and then we'll open the item in the image, and then we'll scroll until we find the yellow element here. Yeah, is it visible? We will see that the ligatured substitute appears in a phrase in the middle of the text. It actually appears 3 times, and if you have a look at it, you can recognize that it's the same phrase, and the phrase is Adonai Eloheinu, which you might know in translation as the Lord our God. Here the substitute is written faster, and the second and the third yod are reduced to a sign. And you will also notice here in the word Eloheinu, Eloheinu our God is usually spelled Aleph Lamed, and you have here an example of Aleph and Lamed. This is how it's supposed to look like. And then you have a Hey, a Yod, of course, Nun, and a Vav. You will see here what we call the nexus Aleph Lamed. If we were to see this in outside this context, isolated as Hebraists, we would probably have a hard time recognizing it, or at least we would ponder a little bit over it, because the Aleph itself is broken. This is an Aleph, and it has a left-hand downstroke, whereas this one here has no left downstroke, and the rather large letter Hey here is reduced to this rounded concave stroke. And this is the Aleph Lamed nexus. And this has to do with the rapidity of the ductus, and also with the fact that this phrase is very repetitive in the text. And then paleographically, if we are to go back at the substitute and discuss the two allographs, we will see that the change in the ductus here also prompts a different definition of one of the allographs. If I click on this one here, you will see that the 3 yods don't exist anymore. We have the first yod. We have an invisible movement, as described with the pen, and then instead of having a second yod, what we have is a hook. I could say a slightly rounded hook, which has a downstroke, a lengthened downstroke, and to this lengthened downstroke, you would have additionally an oblique stroke, and here is more evident because it crosses the other downstroke. So can we actually talk about 3 yods here? Obviously, we shy away from discussing scribal intentions, but from a purely graphical point of view, we no longer have 3 lessons. And this is really important because it changes the way in which we understand these elements in relation to medieval interpretations and to medieval prescriptions on the substitutes of the name of God. And in this respect, it is safe to say that there is Qabbalah in the hands of the scribes, but it's just not the type of Qabbalah that Eliezer of Worms or Abulafia or Rabia envisioned. And the answer is yes. If we think of Qabbalah as a passed down tradition, then the ductus represents indeed what the Qabbalah, a Qabbalah that the scribes had literally in their hands, and that is the embodied motor program that pairs up reverence for the name of God with pragmatic considerations. So you see, the substitute is still there, but it's just not there the way in which it was prescribed. But by focusing on ductus as motor memory, we glimpse a continuity that is less about esoteric speculation and more about the lived writing of practice as craft. Thank you.